Hello everybody and welcome to Swindle Team Event number 4 Doppelganger. So before I introduce how that is going to work in this video, first I want to thank everybody that participated in Swindle Team Event number 3. It's been some amazing competition. I've seen a lot of really thoughtful deck selection, a lot of practice, and just like really high quality of play. I'm really proud to be able to host tournaments of that quality. So without further ado, our next event is going to be called Doppelganger, and it is indeed, as you can see here, I'm going to just post, this is basically the file that you'll get to explain how everything is going to go down. But the way that this is going to work is in our most ambitious team event yet. I've worked with D. Angus Clark III, who's a data scientist, J.T. Russell, who helped massively with the downloading of the entire DOK database, and Jason the Captain Kirk, who also assisted in that effort while also making the art, which you're going to see for the cover of this video, and we're going to be producing some playmats, so I'm going to put out an announcement about that as well. So, with this awesome team, we have worked to bring you a functioning algorithm which will produce doppelgangers of your decks. So what exactly does that mean? So, doppelgangers of your decks will have roughly the same SAS, so like within half a standard deviation it's set for this event, which will be like up or down like 3 or 4 SAS points, somewhere in that area. And then it'll also have very similar AERC distributions. So what does that mean? Essentially, you're going to get a deck of the same SAS range that does similar things according to AERC distributions. So for any single deck, we can now produce a list of hundreds of statistically similar decks. So this is important for multiple reasons. One, it's going to enable us to do some really cool things for this event, but two, this software is going to have some wider applications in finding decks, because in testing the software, I put in some of my best stuff to see what it would spit out, and the lists were really impressive. Like, they were decks that could beat my best decks, which I was not exactly expecting. I was making sure you couldn't game it in that way, so just be aware. If you put a very good deck into this algorithm, it is going to spit out very good decks. You're not going to dodge this by having, your deck just so much better than its SAS range, right? This is, because we're using SAS and the AERC distributions, it's a lot tighter. Like, the fit is a lot tighter than SAS, in my experience of looking at these lists. So, Two things there to be said. One, like I said, if you put in fire, you're going to get out fire. The AERC distributions will be roughly identical, with one exception. There will be no correlation with the amount of artifact controls. So your deck might have R and might not. That has nothing to do with the deck that you input, right? So that's the only thing of AERC that's not going to be virtually identical. Now, for the juicy part here, in this team event, each player will bring 2 decks. From those 2 decks, we will use our newly created algorithm to produce a list of 100 doppelganger decks. So you will have 200 decks basically produced from your initial 2, so each will have 100. Now, in each round, each player will bring one of their 2 decks of their choice to play 2 games. So first, they're going to play their deck against their opponent playing one of their doppelgangers. That will be randomly decided which one of the doppelgangers with a D100 roll. With our bot, I will teach you guys how to do that. Don't worry about it too much, but you're going to use the bot to roll a D100 to decide which one of the doppelgangers will be used. So you're going to play your deck against one of its doppelgangers that your opponent is going to be piloting. Then they will play one of their, then the person will play one of their opponent's doppelgangers versus their opponent playing their deck of choice. for Game 2. So you're going to see 2 games per round. So each player will play 2 games for a total of 6 games per round per team. Again, teams have 3 players. Now, for scoring, we will use Newton scoring, which means 2 wins will count as 3-0, with a tie counting as 1-1. In the case of a tied round, because rounds can tie, the team with the most doppelganger wins. So wins with doppelganger decks will be awarded the round, with 1 extra point, just to clarify how scoring will work. If things are still tied after all of that, so you have equal wins, you have equal doppelganger wins, during regulation, that will actually be a tie. During the playoffs, as before, we're going to use Newton scoring and doppelganger wins to decide tiebreakers. In the event of a tie, after all of that, which hopefully won't happen incredibly often, but could, after all of that, 2 players decided by the teams, so any of your 3 players, will use any of the 3 doppelgangers that their team piloted, i.e. one of the 3 doppelgangers of the opponent's decks, to bring to a best-of-1 Archon or Reversal game, which will be the format, Archon or Reversal, will be determined by a coin flip immediately prior to that game being played. So you're going to bring the deck, and then the coin is flipped. So you're going to look for something that's going to give you that even matchup. Now, league structure will be 6 Swiss rounds followed by a top cut. It'll work just like Swindle Team Event 3 did. Ties will complicate everything, but we're looking for 8 or 16 teams, depending on league size, for the playoffs. And we may allow some wildcard rounds. So, for example, in this team event, we had 10 teams, which condensed to 8 teams for the top cut. It's not an exact science because of ties, but we're looking to award players for the around the X2 mark, right? We're looking to award teams X2 mark or above. So, again, just to quickly recap, we've produced this new software which can produce hundreds of doppelgangers for each deck. For each of the 2 decks that you'll bring, you'll get a list of 100 doppelgangers of each of them. Remember that in the AERC distributions, which will be mirrored, artifact control is not included. So, for example, you cannot bring a Heart of the Forest deck and assume, because it does not have artifact control, that your opponent will not. So your opponent may have artifact control, your opponent may not. It's just not correlated. So expect the same distribution that you would in normal Keyforge. Next, I wanted to talk a little bit about strategy. So I would advise you to think of a deck at the very least that would not have, you know, this sounds kind of weird, right? That would not have like a terrible matchup against itself or like create like a horrible situation for you. So I can think of an example. So I have one deck called Orlock of Green Police Bazaar that puts a bunch of amber on itself and does amazing things with that amber. That being said, the other thing that makes Orlock good is it has a ton of creature control. So that game may boil down to like, well, if somebody stacks the amber, somebody else is going to knock it off. Like, maybe that's not exactly the game that you want to play. So that would still be viable, though, right? Like, if that's the game I want to play, and I think that like Orlock is really, really difficult to pilot in that kind of way, what you're basically trying to do is bring a deck that's going to produce the kind of game that you personally want to play, right? There's no, like, wrong here, but you're going to get a very, very similar deck with totally different cards. So, like, I was impressed by, like, the house and set diversity of this when I typed in some of my best decks and stuff. Like, you're going to get, like, different card decks that have, like, different lines of play, but like ultimately kind of punch in the same way. So it's like, you know, if I brought a deck that's like fast and has a ton of disruption, I'm going to see a deck that has fast and have a ton of disruption. So, you know, be ready for that, right? So it's like, oh, you know, maybe you want to do this, but like, you might not want to bring your 4 Control the Weak deck because you're going to run into something else with a ton of disruption, right? So it's kind of like, what kind of game do you want to see? And remember that you can bring 2 decks. The reason that you can bring 2 decks is so like, oh, like I'm not really digging exactly how this kind of game is going for me, because this is a new format for everybody. I want you to have a little bit of flexibility, so try to bring 2 different kinds of decks, or if you think for whatever reason, like you might have an edge over one of the other players due to bringing one of the 2 of them, there's some tactics to be put into play there. So, for now, that's everything that I have to say. In the description, you will find links to 1, our Discord, 2, the sign-up sheets for this event, and 3, you'll also find my Patreon account if you want to support the work that I'm doing for the game. I would greatly appreciate it. All of our events at Swindle are free, with the exception of charity events when we run them. But, you know, so I hope that you guys enjoy this. I'm really excited about this. And as a final note, we will eventually be releasing this software to be available to the public. But we have to do a lot more in terms of implementation for like putting it on the web and stuff, basically, and just like exactly how we want it to work. We kind of got it working for this event, and then we're going to go from there in terms of public-facing presentation. So, have fun. I really think that this is going to be a great event. It's going to have a little bit more of a casual vibe to it, but I think that our last event was super kind of strategic and rewarded, you know, a ton of practice. This is going to be something that's going to award you for knowing the deck that you bring very, very well, like knowing when to do X and when not to do X. That's going to kind of reward your knowledge of your decks. So, you know, bring something that you really know or something that you really want to get to know. All right. Good luck, everybody.